We are live, folks. We are live streaming as of this moment. So, not sure how that changes anything. How many of you saw the YouTube of our last presentation? You saw that? Of Dan's presentation? And I think there's one out of Gene Nickel as well. It's been circulating. What's wrong with this damn thing? Am I doing something wrong here? Take the mic right out. Okay, thank you. Is the mayor here? Mayor Kopelov? She's traveling? Because I missed her last meeting, and I didn't want to do that this time. We have here tonight two very special guests. Welcome all, everyone. Some of you have been here before. This is our third meeting of the Transylvania Partners for Democracy. And we expect to have one a month through the end of the year. And we're glad you came out and joined us. We have two very special guests tonight. Tom and Lib Campbell. Many of you are familiar with them through the newspaper. Their columns appear regularly in the Transylvania Times. This is, as I said, this is the third in the series, and we had organized back, it was a cold December afternoon, I remember, when I read, can you imagine that, a cold day? And I read Tom's piece in the Times about Pamlico County, what they were doing down there. And they had gotten organized and had formed a Pamlico County, a Pamlico Partners for Democracy group. And they had come to the realization that our democracy is under threat. At about the same time, that notion was circulating around here, that this election year was going to be, it was going to be different. Things were not going to be the same. This is going to be, and it soon became commonplace. Media, actually, mainstream media eventually picked up on it. They were slow, as you can imagine. But this is the most important election of our lifetime. And very few people really questioned that at the time, but some people say, well, I'm not sure. Let's see. Well, events unfolded. 34 felony accounts later, people were beginning to take another look at that notion, that it was important, that there was a threat, a serious threat to democracy, and that if we just went sleepwalking through 2024, then we would pay a heavy price, and our children would perhaps pay an even heavier one. It's reached a point where with my friends that we felt like doing nothing was not an option, and we had to do something. And Tom came along and gave us that chance. We said, well, by golly, here it is. It was like a gift thrown to us. If you want to do something, let's do this. It sounds awfully good. It sounds reasonable. It sounds doable. So we hopped on it, and we've been going at it ever since. We actually have, and I don't tell everybody this, but we have $1,000 in the bank. So that's pretty good.
We need more.
That should not leave this room. Tom Campbell began his career as a part-time radio announcer in Greenville while still in high school. He went on to manage and own television and radio stations across the state. He is perhaps best known for having created, produced, and moderated the public television weekly talk show called NC Spin for more than 21 years. Like his wife, Lib, he has been a regular columnist in the newspapers across the state, including the Transylvania Times. his column, as I said, it was a milestone for us on his column on the Pamlico County Partners. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. His wife, Lib Campbell, she is pastor emeritus at St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Raleigh. She received her BA in religion from Emeritus and her master's in divinity from Duke Divinity School. And she too is a regular columnist. And I'm sure many of you, most of you have read her pieces in the Transylvania Times as well. She's also the author of numerous articles in various journals and other publications. She has an incredible record of they both do actually, of public service. It's very important to them. And they excel at it, unlike any couple I know of. And that's one of the reasons it's such a pleasure to spend some time with them and have the opportunity to have them share some thoughts with you. They set an example for all of us. Tom and Lib have become increasingly concerned about the nation's bitter divisions and the rise of right-wing political extremism. As Tom said in a recent column, and I quote, "The future of this democratic republic we have loved for 248 years is threatened, and unless enough of us come together to make dramatic changes, we may be another notation in history of a grand experiment that failed." It's my pleasure and honor to welcome Tom and Lib Campbell to Brevard and to our little gathering here tonight.
Thank you, Wayne. We appreciate being invited to one of the most beautiful places in North Carolina, and we have enjoyed the scenery and all of the benefits of being here. Is anybody here, by the way, from the Transylvania Times? Raise your hand. Well, I'm sorry. I want to thank them for publishing our articles. We don't get paid anything for doing it. Thank you. We don't get paid anything for doing it, and we send them.
You don't get paid for a lot of stuff.
Probably about what I'm worth. So we send them out to newspapers, and we never know who publishes it and who doesn't publish it. But Wayne and several here have been very kind in responding to us, and so we're very appreciative of being able to have this opportunity. It was December of 1773 in Wilmington, North Carolina. Colonel Cornelius Harnett received a visitor from Massachusetts colony by the name of Quincy. Quincy told Harnett about what was going on in Massachusetts. The colonists had grown increasingly agitated and disgusted with the way they were being treated by the British Crown. And the Massachusetts colony had formed what they called a committee of communication so that they could begin spreading information to each other about what was taking place and what they were doing about it. Harnett called 30 leading citizens from the Carolina colony together. He lived in Wilmington, which was at the time the largest community in North Carolina, and they formed a committee of correspondence. It is this committee of correspondence which is the template for what is happening with Partners for Democracy, and we applaud you for what you are doing. That committee led to, ultimately, elections and the first provincial Congress that was taking place in the United States in New Bern in 1774. So it was very historical, and it was very worthwhile. And what you're doing here in Transylvania County is important, and we hope it will be replicated throughout North Carolina.
The Partners for Democracy of Pamlico County greet you. Our conversation at dinner was about how important it is for small groups across the state to be talking to one another, inspiring one another, reaching out throughout communities across this state to spread the message, to raise up ideas and hope among people that we can save democracy. I think it's at risk, and that's why I started writing for NC Spin, and I'm thankful that Transylvania picks us up. And anyhow, I appreciate being here tonight. Tom and I have always, we've been married almost 59 years. We have never lacked for conversation.
It's an endurance test.
We have never lacked for conversation. And we were sitting on our back porch one time, and I said, you know, we ought to do a podcast. I'll be left sink, and you can be right sink. Because that's how we brush our teeth, in our bathroom.
And it is sort of the way, philosophically, we have looked at
Yes,
things.
it is. Yes. But you have moved more to the middle. And
We don't have a middle sink. Our philosophy is often wrong, never in doubt.
All right, let me tell you a little bit about my getting here. I had a high school English teacher in the 11th grade who said, Lib, I've never met anybody more opinionated than you are. And I thought, you know, I think I was born and reared in a church where justice was important. And my whole life, even in high school, was sort of directed toward seeking justice and speaking justice as much as I could. Most of the writing I've done has been of a spiritual formation nature, writing for the church, liturgies and devotionals and all that kind of stuff. But I felt like in the sort of tradition of the Old Testament prophets, let justice rain down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. It was my time to step into a public, more public, broadly public, not just United Methodist, and speak my mind. And so that's how I got here, and thankfully Tom puts up with it.
I encourage you to actually. I told her when I had to beg her almost to get started writing these columns because I've been doing this for a long time, and she had questions. You know, what happens if people don't like them, or what do I need to say, or is there anything I can't say? And I said, I will tell you this. We started a radio show together at a radio station we owned up in Elizabeth City some years ago. About 6 months after we started the show, she kicked me off the show. It became her. It was so bad to the point where this was back in the time when you went to the grocery store. Credit cards were not common at that time. So you went to the grocery store and you wrote a check if you didn't have cash, right? So she'd be in the grocery line and the cashier's, you know, running through the goods that we bought and so forth like that. And Lib would pull out a checkbook and she said, oh, let me show you some identification. And the cashier would say, honey, you don't need to show me any identification. I know your voice. I listen to you on the radio all the time. I grew up in a relatively unusual family. I figured out some years later. My dad started and ran the television station in Greenville, North Carolina, back in 1953. And it was just expected that you were going to read the newspaper and you were going to watch the news, because if you didn't have anything to talk about at the dinner table. So I had an early introduction from that time. Both of them were very stalwart voters and very involved in the democratic process. And I guess the thing that inspired me and got me really going into the political realm was in September of 1960, a young Jack Kennedy came to Greenville, North Carolina, campaigning while everybody was wondering, could anybody elect a Catholic to be president of the United States? And since Dad was the head guru at the television station, he got to meet Jack Kennedy. And since I was 12 years old or so and was with him, I got to shake his hand also. I promised my mother I would never wash it again. I've had to renege on that. Back in those days in North Carolina, particularly in the area that I grew up in, there were 3 registered Democrats to every 1 registered Republican. That's the way the makeup of this state was. In fact, the chairman of the Republican County Republican Party in Pitt County was a fellow named Red Cavendish, who boasted he could have a Republican Party county convention in the phone booth at the county courthouse. It was that way. But I did get very interested in covering politics and being involved in politics. During the course of my career, I got to the point where, as Wayne said, we owned and operated, our family business was radio stations. And so for some 20 years, I wrote a daily editorial comment on our radio stations, which was very unusual at the time. I'll never forget I was introduced to speak at the Rotary Club, and the guy that was introducing me, who, by the way, was the post office, said, "He talks like Jesse and votes like Jim," meaning Jesse Helms and Jim Hunt, which was not always true, but anyway. So from there, I was honored to be the Assistant State Treasurer of North Carolina, the Chief Deputy for the late Harlan Boyles, who taught me about state government in North Carolina, gave me an education as I followed him around to all the meetings. The Treasurer's on more boards and commissions than anybody else in the state. And so he taught me about that, and that was what enabled me to be able to start NC Spin. The whole premise of the show was that we were not going to try to tell you as a voter, as a viewer, what you should think. We were going to try to present to you both sides of issues and then think you had enough sense to make up your own mind as to the right and wrong of it. How many of you ever saw our TV show, NC Spin? We've been off the air now for a couple of years. I brought some swag from the TV show that I'm trying to get rid of. So if any of you would like a coffee mug or an umbrella or a tote bag, feel free to help yourself. But it was quite an education to me, and that's really what helped me to get to where I am in state politics. And I managed Harlan's statewide treasurer's campaign in 92 and 96, and then from that went to the TV show in 1998 and did it for 21 and a half years, 1,154 shows, the longest running television talk show in North Carolina history. So,
Can I tell one story?
No, because I think I know what it is.
So Tom was doing this campaign with Harlan Boyles around the state. And George Boyle, who was one of the legal advisors to Harlan, said that I worked a room better than anybody else on the campaign trail other than Sarah Parker. Sarah Parker. But we went to a state treasurer's meeting held at some of the banks, some of the bank presidents and so forth in Charlotte. And so we had driven up in several cars, and coming back in the car, I was not with Tom in the car. I was with some of the bank heads who had been, schmoozing up there. And with our deputies. And with the deputies. And I asked them just right out loud, why are there no women or minorities in this gathering? And you know what Tom said? I will never let you ride alone again.
Thought I was going to get fired. I hadn't been assistant treasurer that long. All right, let us sort of set the stage for what we're going to do tonight. I hope you will see that the back and forth, we do this on issues, and we skip around very often in our swimming pool as we float around on our little noodles with glasses of wine and discuss politics, or in the car or whatever. So here's the way I think I see what's going on right now. This is a presidential election that most voters would love to be able to choose when they go to the ballot, none of the above. We've got one candidate who can't tell the truth. He's an egomaniac and an autocrat, and the other candidate won't face the truth. He wants to shut down at 8 p.m., which just doesn't work when you're president. So we have an economy that, by all estimations, is one of the fastest growing and best economies the world has seen, and yet not many people recognize it or want to admit it because they see the loaf of bread at the grocery store is 15 cents more than it was before COVID, or they see the gasoline price is before it was. But it's a historic recovery. We've got a Congress that is so gnarled up it can't seem to do anything except fight with each other. We've got a rogue Supreme Court. Civility has been abandoned in this country. Our civil rights are still under siege. It feels like the wild, wild west. There are more guns than there are people, I think. In North Carolina, we've got a legislature that is fighting culture wars and can't seem to fight them enough, grabbing power like nothing I've ever seen in the history. I've been covering politics since 1965. I've never seen anything like this before. And the evidence of it is what they're trying to do to dismantle public education in North Carolina. And it just makes me mad as I can be. And I was telling them tonight, my column this week, by the way, I hope you'll read it, is on vouchers, because I think that this is a thinly disguised straw man to try to get across a cultural war for school choice. The Republicans have been trying to fight this since the 1990s. So we've got partisan courts, we've got truth, trust, civility abandoned, and I don't know whether you've noticed it or not, but there's no shame today. You can rob a bank and get caught.
You could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not.
Which would be difficult. Number one, I don't want to go to Fifth Avenue. Number two, I don't own a gun. But anyway. All right, so this sort of sets the stage, I hope, for some of the things that we'd like to talk about. And Wayne gave us a lot of liberty to be able to pick and choose, and we ain't from here, so we're going to be leaving tomorrow, and y'all can be just as mad with us as you want to be. But we thought we'd try to tell you some of the things that concern us and some of the things that we see, and hopefully some suggestions about things that we can do. Let's start with the current election. Lib, kick it off.
Well, you said that the thing I needed to say first was that we've got a lot of questions, all of us. And I told Tom on the way up here, I said, I hope these folks are not thinking we're bringing answers. But the one thing that I would
They're
tell...
all going to get up and leave now.
The one thing I always told the classes I taught in the church, my job is not to give you the answers. My job is to shape you in ways that you ask better questions. And then you live those questions into the answers that come from them. And that's kind of where we are right now. We need to question everything. That used to be a bumper sticker in the 60s. Question authority. Raise questions in groups and ask questions of people like, why in the world are you doing that? The autocracy, have any of you read Anne Applebaum's book, The Twilight of Democracy? I think she does a really wonderful explanation of how a democracy can be turned. And you talked about the Weimar Revolution, and I haven't done a lot of study in that, but Hitler came into that and reversed almost every piece of that. And there may have been cracks in that republic, and probably there were, which is the problem now, is that there are enough cracks in our culture that somebody like a Donald Trump and the people who've written Project 2025 can come in and think they have a chance. This is how democracies fall, is when we have these small cracks that get exacerbated by people of ill will.
And that sums up the current election.
Well, I mean, all right, so
That's supposed to be the topic. Read the script.
I do go off script.
Yes, you do.
The current election, you know, and I think we're just in a mess. And who was it that said, what a revolting development this is? Somebody said that one time. And so we've got this choice, but it's not a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden or whoever the Democrat is. It's a choice between democracy and autocracy, the loss of freedom. And it's so funny that we have a river community, and we have a parade every year on July 4th. And the posters that were on some of the little floats of the parade, let freedom ring, you know, liberty and justice for all. And I'm thinking, don't you know, and they're all conservative. They're all Trumpers and ditto heads. And I'm thinking, don't you know what you're going to lose? And they must not. They have not read. Ann Applebaum and she still writes good articles about that for The Atlantic. But read smart people on this and share the books and talk about the books and share your books with people, even though you don't get them back a lot of the times.
One of the things that you've written about and have done much more research on than I is Project 2025. Talk about that for a minute or two.
Well, I had not heard, I will be honest, I had not heard about it. And our daughter-in-law, who is really pretty apolitical, came in and said, Lib, you help me all things political and all things theological, so I've got something to show you. And she showed me a video of somebody talking about Project 2025. And I thought, holy cow, that sounds scary as all get out. And then Taraji Henson, did you hear her on the BET Awards? She's a famous black actress. You would recognize her face. She's in all kinds of things, like Golden Globe, Emmy, all that winner stuff. And she has recognized it. But in the last month, people are coming to see, you know, we think Donald Trump is the total problem, some of us. But this is a well-planned, systematic manifesto that will be implemented from day one, January 20th, 2025, and it will disrupt and destroy all of the administrative state of the country. And if you read through it, if you go online, Project 2025, the manifesto, which is 900 and some pages long, talks about how they're going to defund the education department. The DOJ will be totally under the control of the president. And can you imagine that with Donald Trump as president or whoever a conservative is? But there's an arm of this project that is already at work identifying about 3,000, maybe more, employees of the government, federal employees, to see if he can identify those who would not pledge fealty to Donald Trump.
Well, in fact, they say, you can take a sip of water and I'll fill in here. They're saying they're going to fire 3,000 federal employees the day after they take
day
office.
one.
Now,
On day one.
there is a civil service law in this country which protects people who work for the federal government.
But have you ever seen such a group of people that flout law like these people
Well, it's
do?
never bothered Donald Trump before. I'm not sure why it would now. But this Project 2025, I've written a little bit about it. Lib has written extensively about it. And we get mail from, and you can guess from who, but they are saying, oh, this is just fake news. There's nothing to
Somebody wrote me and
this.
said that was fake news. And I'm thinking, you know what? You can believe what you want, and it just worries me that people don't want to read broadly enough to find out if there is something on the other side of this issue that they are missing. And because you don't have to scratch the surface very hard to read about Project 2025.
Here's the scenario. This happened to us just last night, as a matter of fact. We were at a dinner party. We were invited to some friend's house, and it got to be about 8:30, and I announced we've got to leave because we're getting up early tomorrow morning to go to Brevard tomorrow. And so one of the guests said, oh, really? What are you doing in Brevard? And the hostess said, oh, they're speaking up there to a group in Brevard. And this guest said, well, what are you talking about? And I tried to defer just as much as I could.
No, it's called poking the bear.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I said politics. Now, by the way, a lot of people don't like, watch your roller eyes. A lot of people don't like politics. But I tell them that that's only because they don't understand the word. Poly is a Greek word that means many, and ticks are blood-sucking insects.
Way to go.
So this person said, what are you going to be talking about? I said, politics. Oh, really? What specifically are you going to say? And I said, well, we'll talk about the elections and some stuff like that. Oh, really? This guy came up and he said, okay, well, what are you going to say about the elections? I said, well, I'm going to say that I think that Donald Trump is the most despicable candidate we've ever had running for a presidential election in America. And he said, oh, yeah? Well, what about Joe Biden and what he's doing and such and such? But have you had this before? Every time you raise a point, they try to raise a false equivalency. So I didn't do it because she's poking me like, get the hell out of here. We're getting ready to get into a food fight. But what I should have done is I should have said, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Donald Trump. We're not talking about Joe Biden. He said, well, I like some of his policies. And I said, oh, really? Tell me specifically, what policy do you like that Donald Trump has? And by this time, she's grabbing me by the arm and pulling me out the door. But they can't tell you. If you've been in a discussion like this before, they'll tell you, I like some of his policies. I don't think much of him as a man, but I like some of his policies. And if you press them, what policy are they liking? I doubt very seriously you can find out much about that.
One thing about thinking about the choice, you know, we think that Donald Trump is the head of the snake, but this goes so much deeper than Donald Trump. This has infiltrated the Republican Party to ways they have so capitulated to some of this that it is just sickening to me. And to think about, you know, the grand old party playing into some of this is something. Now, the election of senators, and we do those elections, the House, fairly frequently. So we ought to be able to, you know, every 6 years, every 2 years, get rid of some people if we run good candidates.
Well, but the system is built so that you can vote someone out of office if they kill their mother, but maybe not, you know. The whole thing that I'm sure we're going to get asked, and so let's go ahead and answer the question. What do we think about what's going on? By the way, we've rewritten this talk at least 3 times.
Yeah, the debate kind of shot
The
it in the
debate, and
foot.
then the Supreme Court, and then all the brouhaha that has gone along with it. So I've never been afraid to express an opinion before. I'll do it now. I don't see any way in the world Joe Biden can win this election. I think he's a terribly fine guy. I voted for him. I admire him. He's done a lot of wonderful things for this country, but the Democratic Party is at war with each other right now. And if they splinter going into November, they're going to give the election to Trump. And so I don't see any way that he's going to be able to survive it. As I said in my opening, one can't tell the truth and the other one won't face the truth. Even if you've been watching the last couple of days, what's been going on with the House and the Senate, this is one of those things of having to tell the emperor that he has no clothes. And it's not an easy thing to do, particularly when it's someone that you admire. But I'm afraid that anything that we do, I loved what James Carville said the other day. Did y'all read James Carville? Carville is the raging Cajun. I mean, I just love him. He says whatever the hell he thinks. I mean, he's out there. But he says that what he thinks is what the Democrats ought to do. And by the way, I'm an unregistered voter, and I am more of the moderate toward right-leaning in the past than I am now. These fools are turning me into a Democrat. And so Carville says what he thinks we ought to do is have 4 national town hall meetings and have them televised nationally and let the candidates who might be presumptive nominees for the party have the candidates appear at these town halls and let them face the audience, let them face questioning and sort of go through the whole process of vetting them, if you will, on national television. Now, at first, that doesn't seem like such a great idea, but the power of television is incredible. And I will tell you, it would attract huge audiences. The only way I see any candidate ever being able to come close to beating Trump is to get the publicity, to get the recognition, to be able to face the voters. Now, in my crazy dreams, I have it in my mind that next week is the Republican National Convention, and so Joe Biden is going to begin tossing out little teaser lines during the convention about maybe he might reconsider, and so the publicity will be on Biden and not on Trump in that convention. Maybe I'm wrong.
But you know, Tom, people talk about Joe Biden's mental state and his incapacities and growing infirmities and all that. Donald Trump is no spring chicken in the first place.
Nor is he in the Mensa Society.
Right, he has a hard time. He has a hard time formulating thoughts.
Really?
Do you think? Am I wrong?
Really?
And I'm thinking, you know, where do they not see that? And it's just ignored that we see the capacities of one side, but we ignore some of the lack of capacity on the other side. And plus, you've got a person who just lies all the time. Even his niece, Mary Trump. How many of you just love Mary Trump? Yeah. And she is so vocal about it. And it must be very hard for her to do that, actually, considering how vicious he can be.
If any of you have read many of my columns, you know that I primarily write about North Carolina because it's primarily what I know. And again, it goes back to the education I got from Harlan Bowles. Through the 21 years I did this television show, obviously I got to know a lot of sources, people who work in campaigns, who are involved in politics very deeply. One of them talked to me Monday before we left, and he said, Tom, let me tell you about an internal poll that will never be publicized, but I think it's valid. Prior to the debate, Joe Biden was trailing Donald Trump 9.9 points, 9.9% in North Carolina. After that debate, he's trailing Donald Trump 11.9%. He said Democrats across North Carolina are worried. In fact, they're in depression because of the fact that the party is divided. One source told me that if things don't get better, every statewide Democrat on the ballot in November is going to get defeated, with the exception of Elaine Marshall. And Elaine Marshall is just such an icon, and she's been Secretary of State and has been there for so long. She probably will win. They are saying now that our current congressional delegation in Washington, in the House, is 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. They're predicting it's going to be 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats come November 6th. We're going to see veto-proof majorities, solid veto-proof majorities in each chamber of our legislature. Mark Robinson will become our governor. God forbid Mark Robinson becomes governor, but if things go according to what these people are telling me, that's going to be...
We've got work to do, y'all.
Yeah. And Dan Bishop will beat Jeff Jackson, who I think is one of the brightest young stars in the Democratic stable. We've got a superintendent of public instruction, Mo Green. Some of you might know he was superintendent of Forsyth County Schools, has an enviable record in education, and he's running against, I'm not being recorded, am I? Oh, yes, I am. Well, a nut job, Michelle Morrow, who's homeschooling her children. She wants to be our superintendent of public instruction? I don't get that. And the state auditor's race, which is very, very important because the auditor is the one who is going into all these state agencies to make sure that they are spending their money the way they're supposed to, they're being responsible, they're doing it legally. Dave Bolick, who is former head of the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees, son of a dear friend of mine, but he is a MAGA candidate, running against Jessica Holmes, who's a former Wake County commissioner, was appointed to the job after Beth Wood resigned. These folks are all in jeopardy so far as the North Carolina elections are concerned. We can be worried and should be worried about the national picture, but folks, this is North Carolina. This is what's going to be affecting us and governing us for the next 2 years or 4 years, and it's very frightening.
Can I say a word to the women? In 2018, it was a curiosity to me, and I looked up statistics on the number of women voters who were registered in Wake County. That was all I was looking for at that time, and how many women voted. And there are, and it's still true, there are more women registered to vote across North Carolina than there are men. There are more women, and I've got the numbers, 68% of voters, 68% in 2020 of voters in the 2020 election were female. Now, there is a war against women that is going on. There is a lot of repressive, and it's regressive, and I feel like I grew up with, Gloria Steinem and the bra burning and all that kind of stuff, and I sure hate to go through all that stuff again. But we are living a dystopian vision, and Project 2025 has a piece in it that the Comstock Act, are you familiar with that? The Comstock Act will be the law of the land. And so numbers of women in this country are diminishing because of maternal mortality. Women are dying because of reproduction problems with abortions and so forth like that, non-treatment, people not treating that. And so that's a very scary kind of thing that women are under such assault. I was in Kinston, which is eastern North Carolina. Below the gun rack was a bumper sticker that said, repeal the 19th Amendment. Repeal the 19th, I mean, this is on their radar, folks. They're going to take away women's rights and put us back to, you know, this is a Handmaid's Tale thing in the making. And we have fought this fight before. Women have only been able to vote for about 100 years. So what we can encourage women to speak up. There's still not as many women who are serving in elected offices in the state and in the national government. And so we need to encourage our young women to, I went to Girls State. Did any of you in here go to Girls State? Do you know what, I see a hand back there. And that was a long time ago. The American Legion sponsored.
Do they have electricity then?
They did. They did. There was some rats running really fast. But that was where, in Girls State, all these young women, I think we were juniors in high school, and we were learning about the political process. And we had, we learned civics. They've taken civics out of the school curriculum in a lot of schools. So we need to encourage, women have enough voting power to control a lot of what goes on. And I just want to put that out there. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Well, we are running, I'm watching the clock, and I want to be able to make sure you folks have opportunity to ask questions of us on a number of different topics, and I guarantee you we probably have an opinion about it. There's some topics that we had listed down here that we obviously aren't going to get into tonight. One of them was the Supreme Court, particularly this immunity decision, which was passed down, which just goes to show the partisanship of our judicial system in America and in North Carolina. If you'll look at the votes that come out of our state Supreme Court, the Republicans hold the majority of seats in the Supreme Court, and so the rulings all come down based that way.
Can I interject one little thing? When Clarence Thomas was being put through the Congress, and Anita Hill was, 1991, I think it was, Anita Hill was telling her story, her Me Too story, and nobody paid attention to that. Nobody paid attention to that. When Christine Blasey, or whatever her name was, talked about Brett Kavanaugh, you remember he came on television and he just boo-hooed. I love my beers. And I'm thinking, what kind of person we've elected and set people on the Supreme Court that should never have been there. Dahlia Lithwick. How many of you have read Lady Justice? She has the Anita Hill story and a lot of the Me Too stories. She's a lawyer with the Supreme Court. But OAC, or AOC, or whatever her name, she has filed impeachment papers today. Hallelujah. And you know it won't get anywhere, but it's going to get a lot of publicity, that's for sure.
So one of the questions is, what can we do about the situation with the courts? In North Carolina specifically, again, that's my primary focus. In North Carolina, I think we created just a terrible situation when we allowed judicial candidates to declare their party affiliation beside their name. Now, the justification for doing it is that nobody knows these people. Well, you know, either the voters should take the time to get to know these people, or we should not be electing judges. And that's my position, is that we ought to find a solution other states have found in being able to have a nominating process and a process in which they serve a term certain, and after that term certain might be able to be reconfirmed somehow, but we should not be electing judges. That's one thing we can do, and that's one thing you can talk to candidates running for state elections and legislative elections, is we need to do away with this, because what it has done is it's made the courts partisan. They're going to vote according, and by the way, they do this regardless of whether the Republicans are in charge, the Democrats are in charge. They did it when the Democrats were in charge too. Another topic we wanted to talk about was the legislature, and I think we have seen in this last 2 years in the North Carolina legislature the worst power grabs I've ever seen in my lifetime. And they can do it and get away with it because they have veto-proof majorities. They're conducting culture wars against people they don't like, and it's very obvious. And a lot of the problem with that comes about because of gerrymandering. And they have gotten the courts now to declare that they have total absolute authority to draw districts in any way they wish to do it. They can get districts drawn now using computer-generated graphics in which one side of your street is in one district and another side of the street is in another district, because their voters are on one side and the opponent's voters are on the others. Gerrymandering is just a terrible practice that has got to stop, and we've got to again talk to these legislators and say, we need you to support some sort of process for drawing districts which is fair. However, the people in power don't want to give up power, so they're not going to allow gerrymandering. Anyway, there are several things along this lines for the legislature that I'm concerned about. You had some.
Well, I wanted to talk about voting rights and civil rights and LGBTQI rights and those kinds of things that are being eaten away. And the Civil Rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act, was first passed as part of the Great Society in 1965, or about that time. But it had a sunset, and so it's had to be renewed repeatedly. And this last Congress will not renew it. And they have not renewed it. In fact, they have made obstacles for people voting. They have made it harder. Remember what Brian Kemp did in Georgia? And he shut down voting places and all of the hubbub about ballot boxes and all of that. There was a story today that they're putting ballot boxes back out. But in Massachusetts or somewhere, I don't remember where. But the very idea that we would deny voting rights to citizens and people who live here, who are entitled and have the right to vote, is ludicrous. And this with LGBT and cutting funding for health care for young people who are having gender identification kinds of situations. And I'm stepping into a little bit of probably something that may be uncomfortable. In one of my churches, I had three young people who were struggling like this with sexual identity and trying to figure out who they were. And two of them have transitioned, but the suicide numbers for young people in this category is about 39% higher than across the board with young people. So we've done great harm in something we don't have great understanding of. And, you know, John Wesley said, do no harm. And here we are doing harm.
Let me move to another topic because, again, we really do want to make sure we give you time for answering questions. I want to talk about the media for a second. The media is sometimes justifiably criticized, called fake media. Let me tell you my thoughts on this. One of the most important things that has happened, discouraging things that has happened, is the demise of our local newspapers. There are something like 20 newspapers a week that are going under in North Carolina. Not in North Carolina, in the nation. We're closing newspapers at alarming rates. Now, think about this for a second. And this is a pitch for you. If you already are not subscribed to the Transylvania Times, do it. Support that paper. It is very, very important so far as democracy is concerned. Where else are you going to learn what your city council is doing? Where else are you going to learn what the county commissioners or your school board are doing? Because frankly, radio can't do that. Television gives you a 30-second news story, and if you watch local news on television, if it bleeds, it leads. They want to have wrecks, robberies, murders, rapes. That's what goes on the first 10 or 15 minutes of every television newscast. It's not news, but it gets eyeballs, and that's what's happened in the media business. That's what's going on so far as CNN and MSNBC and Fox, and they're just selling eyeballs. I don't really know that they care philosophically about the subjects that they're talking about, but if they get your eyeball, they can use it to sell more commercials and make more money. And this comes from somebody who has been in the media world for 30 years, and I can tell you that's what's going on. Be selective about what you watch and what you read, but please support your local media. If you've got a good local, I remember nearby in Hendersonville, North Carolina, WHKP, I think is the call letters of it, Art Cooley and that radio station over there, known him for years. They're good local public service stations. They're disappearing. They've been bought out by groups. So it doesn't, the radio like I used to do when I was in the radio business, community radio, it's gone. It's all automated. It's satellites and all that kind of stuff. Support the people who are doing the good work with that.
There are parallels between what is going on in the government and what has gone on in the church, in my opinion. And I think it has to do with the fact that in civic society, the role of the church, the role of the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club and all of those things was to help shape people with values of justice and kindness and generosity and mercy and all of those lessons. If you read any Kiwanians in the group,
or Rotarians, Civitans.
Is it fair to all
Elks,
concerned? Is it fair? Think about that question.
Four-way
That's the
test.
first of the four-way test.
We don't belong to civic clubs anymore, and that's one of the reasons why community has become a problem. We don't go to churches. We don't belong to civic clubs. We don't do community-type events. You know what we're doing?
We're
Staring at that screen.
And
You know
so-
what the statistics are? I had them here just a minute ago. Something like the average adult is watching a phone screen or an iPad or something like that, something like 6 hours a day. And our kids are doing it like 11 or 12. I mean, it's just absurd. You can't be friends, you can't be community, you can't be talking with people. And by the way, if you can't talk to people, how are you ever going to resolve any issues? Mm-hmm. So that's certainly something that I think that could be done. Can I talk just a minute or two? We're going to run over time, and I hate to do that, about election reforms. Because I think we need election reforms in North Carolina. We've got to do something about the campaign contribution rules. The independent expenditure groups are buying our elections. The estimate that I've heard is that there will be somewhere between $300 and $800 million spent on advertising during this November election campaign. We're going to be bombarded with, and these things are, these ads that they're running, they're not informative ads. Here's what Lib wants to do if she gets elected. No, they want to say, Lib's going to run an ad saying, let me tell you about that scumbag Tom and all the things that he doesn't like and all the things he's going to do to you.
I'll be much more kind.
It's questionable. So we need to do something about elections. I think we need to go back to changing our primary election dates. We set them in March thinking we might have some say-so in presidential campaigns. That hasn't worked for 2 campaigns. In fact, if you want my opinion, we should change the primary dates to June so that they don't have as much time to spend as much money running each other down. We should shorten the North Carolina ballot. We vote for entirely too many people. 30%, 20%, no, only 20% of the people who voted in the May primary got all the way down our ballot and voted for all the candidates all the way down. That means 80%, and by the way, we didn't get such, I think it was 24% of the voters turned out for the primary to start off with, and only 20% of them got all the way down the ballot. I mean, if you're running for an office in North Carolina, that's pretty crummy that the voters don't even get all the way down to your race to make a choice. We need to do away with runoff elections in North Carolina. We need to go to some ranked choice or some sort of, I mean, I'm all for taking away the party distinction and let 25 people put their name on the ballot to run for the North Carolina House. Let the top 2 vote getters end up running against each other in November. We got to do some things to improve election integrity in our state. Talk about, Lib, our early introduction to politics and how each of us can do something that really could be effective.
When we were first married in the dark ages, we lived in the neighborhood that Jim and Carolyn Hunt moved into when he came back from Nepal. And he was running for lieutenant governor.
He was precinct chairman. He wasn't running for anything.
But when he started running, it's when we've got most, this was precinct 8.
Precinct 8.
And Jim Hunt was the best organizer of anybody I have ever seen. He had like flashcards, note cards on every registered Democrat in the precinct. and on election.
So he got about 10 or 15 of us together, and he said, okay, your responsibility is to take 10 cards. You are to get those 10 people to the polls to vote. That's your job. And so you call them, you go visit them, you do whatever you need to do, but you make sure they get to the polls to vote. They're Democrats, and they're going to vote our way. And that afternoon, after the voting started, about 2 o'clock, you remember?
Yeah, he would call them and say, well, so-and-so has not voted yet. Give them a call.
Offer to take them to the polls.
And he would say, why don't you just go pick them up? And so mobilizing an electorate, Jim Hunt knew how to do better than anybody I think ever has done.
And guess what? We had in the 8th precinct in that election, we had like 70% of the Democrats who turned out to vote. What I think we're saying here is it doesn't just happen.
And this is,
you got to work for it. You got to go out, knock on doors, and talk to people.
we are the grassroots. We are the ones who do that. We are the ones who canvass and get people registered to vote. We are the people that work the polls. We are the people that will call our neighbor and say, have you voted yet? And, that's what we do. So we've got to be bold in that. We've got to be present in that. We've got to protest. We've got to march. I remember driving my car. I wasn't going to go to the Women's March in Raleigh because I thought it would be so many people. I thought it would be overwhelming. And I can remember coming onto Capitol Boulevard, going to downtown Raleigh, and the cars were just loaded in, just loaded, and my heart just raised. I thought, what a wonderful thing that there are this many people, women, who are excited about women's futures. And it was to be part of the political process, to find places to give voice. You know, I took my 14-year-old granddaughter down. We had posters, and we marched in the Mothers Against Gun Violence March in
And a lot
Raleigh.
of us did the same thing with Bill Barber and his Moral
and
Mondays.
the Moral Mondays, and we were there. And
show up in force. Let people know who you are.
I wore my Protect Roe to the polls.
Oh, did you bring your buttons?
Oh, yeah. After about 2018, I was so on this women's jag. I had about 500 or 600 of these printed and made up. And I've got a few of them left if any of you want one. It
Women
says
vote.
Women Vote. So that people will, you know, see that we know that we have influence at the ballot box.
And Wayne, if y'all want some, we'll get you some. All right? I think we ought to have men vote too. You know?
Yes.
Whoever.
Yes.
All right.
They and them.
Seriously, let's see if we can take some questions. Who's got some questions they want to add? Yes, sir.
I'm bringing you the mic.
Tom, Lib, thank you so much for coming all the way out to Brevard. I hope you're enjoying your visit, and I want to thank everyone here for coming out tonight as well. I'm James Carley. I co-founded the Transylvania Young Progressives group last year as a continuation of what was previously another brand where we support Democratic candidates and values here. And we've got active support among young folks. I do have a question, but first of all, when people wonder, how can people possibly support Trump? I read a really interesting book in the library. It was published in 2016. It was called Assholes, A Study of Donald Trump. And yeah, seriously. And it said people support Donald Trump because they find him entertaining and they like that his policies will hurt the people they hate. That's why people support Donald Trump in the face of it all. It really is, I think, that simple. And how do you get people to exercise reason when that's their belief? That's above my pay grade. My question for you is, how many in this room have heard of Instagram? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you have an Instagram account and you use it? Far fewer people. I would invite you all to encourage that that is something that may explain why things seem uncertain. I was speaking with a Democratic candidate here on Monday, or on Monday, and he said, how many of you, and he was with his campaign committee, it was about 8 folks about your age, and he said, how many of you looked at my campaign website? Everybody in the room except me raised their hand. And I said, I haven't raised your hand, but I've looked at your Instagram page. He said, I didn't know I had an Instagram page. That's my consultant. People under 50 don't read campaign websites. They don't go into candidate websites. It's all social media. How do we raise the awareness? And actually, Jeff Jackson is a great example. I talked to one of my young progressive co-leaders. This guy named Miles, he's a local guy in town. He said, yeah, candidates today, they need to be on Instagram at least. I don't do TikTok, I don't do Facebook, but Instagram is very popular. People need to see that candidates at least appear to be running their own accounts. They need to be speaking to the people through their social media accounts, using their own voice and their own words. And that's one reason Jeff Jackson has become so popular.
I agree with that.
How do we crack through to people of a more wizened generation the influence and the importance of leveraging social media tools that may seem admittedly alien or unfamiliar?
I hate to tell you this, but I'm not sure you can. I get confounded and confused with a lot of this social media. Here's what I do think. I think it makes a tremendous amount of difference if you personally go see someone on behalf of a candidate. Time and time again, it's been demonstrated grassroots election campaigning pays. It works. And I think that's important. I'm not demeaning it or in anything. I don't understand it, and I use Facebook and email, but that's about as far as I can go.
Instagram is how I learned about Project 2025.
I've gotten some amazing jobs that shaped my career thanks to seeing the Instagram posts of an employer in Vermont.
Yeah.
And some of the influencers on TikTok and on Instagram kinds of things, and you build a big following with that.
Yes. I hate to cut it short, but let's get some more questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I love your columns.
Thank you.
So one of the thoughts that I've had in talking with people, because most of us share the concern that Biden is faltering, and there's a concern, therefore, that people won't vote, which is the same as voting for Trump. And you mentioned that Trump is the head of a snake. And one of the things I like to remember is that Biden also is the head of a very large organism, for lack of a better word, and he surrounds himself and has surrounded himself with amazing people who do good work. Supreme Court is an example of the downstream impact of having the right person in that head position, even if he's faltering. And there is, in my opinion, a wonderful VP to step up. So in my opinion, we're not voting just for Biden should he choose to not step down. I hope he does, but should he choose not to, we have to remember we're not just voting for Biden.
Well,
I agree with that, but 72% of the people in a New York Times poll, and what was it, 68% in a CNN poll say he's past his prime, his expiration date's over. We've got to have another candidate.
but I agree with what you're saying. I will vote Democratic. Period. I would vote for a corpse against Donald Trump. But that's just me. I think we've just got to be loud. We've just got to be loud, and we've got to give money to these campaigns.
However, here's the problem. The problem is a divided party is not going to win in 2024. And right now we are a divided, Democrats, I say we, the Democrats are a divided party. And I don't know that anybody can put Humpty Dumpty back together again right now.
I agree.
Well, okay.
I absolutely agree.
All right. Yes. Okay, back there.
Thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it. And I also appreciate the shout out to Ann Applebaum. I agree with you. She's one of the best writers and most insightful writers about democracy in the country. My question is this. My impression is there's a growing number of unaffiliated voters. And I know it's a large number in North Carolina, and I thought it was growing.
It is.
What are your comments about the implications of this, if that group continues to grow and actually exceeds the size of Republicans and Democrats?
It's already exceeded Republicans.
What are the implications there?
Frankly, I think it's a great idea. I'm not crazy about parties anymore. I was a member of the Democratic Party. I ran a campaign for a candidate that was statewide candidate of the Democratic Party. The unaffiliated, here are the advantages to me of an unaffiliated voter. An unaffiliated voter can go into the primary voting booth and tell the registrar, I want a Republican ballot, I want a Democratic ballot. This last primary, I went in and chose a Republican ballot. I wanted to vote against Donald Trump. I wanted to vote against Mark Robinson. I wanted to vote against several of the people who were running, and that was the only way I could voice my opposition. I knew Josh Stein was going to win. I knew some of these other people in the state were going to win. Unaffiliated voters get to have that. I think it makes everybody honest, frankly. I think the parties, Democratic and Republican, have too much power and authority in North Carolina. I wish there was a time when the party structure was such that you had county chairs, you had precinct chairs, and the Democratic Party was responsible for getting the word out to people throughout North Carolina. But that was before mass media. That was before social media. And candidly, it doesn't work as effectively. Right now, what the parties are doing is they are funneling money. Their campaign contribution limits that you can give to a candidate. You can give the Democratic Party or the Republican Party an unlimited amount of money, and you can say, I want you to spend this money for this candidate. Now, legally, they don't have to do that, but practically they do. It's a way of being able to funnel money and circumvent the campaign contribution laws, and I think it's wrong.
And I disagree with him on that. I'm a yellow dog Democrat. I have staked myself out.
She has gone to the polls with our yellow dog before.
I used to
Seriously.
walk to our polling place, and we had a yellow lab, and I would tie a flag around her neck, and we would walk to the polls, and I'm here with my yellow dog.
We voted separately that election.
But I think, to stand for something
I didn't say you didn't stand for something. I just said
important, though, to have a platform of social, and you said coming up here, the Democrats have always had a bent for social justice and action.
I don't think the
And so I
Democratic
don't
Party is
mind
effective
aligning
anymore.
myself with that, not one bit. I don't mind. I'm excited for that.
Be a nice ride home.
Supposing that we choose not to vote for, or to have Joe Biden as the head of the party and continue, then the other option is his black vice president, and if she is eliminated, I think we lose the whole black community.
Are you saying okay, I'm not sure I understand your question totally. First of all, if you don't vote, you elect Donald Trump.
Oh, well, I'm
Okay,
not saying no.
so if you, okay, I mean, I'm like Lib. I will tell you, I think Biden should get off the ticket because I think he can't win. I'm going to vote for him because I think he's between the choices. I
There
mean, I
is
think
no choice.
Yeah, there is no choice. But at the same time, I think we stand a better chance of getting a president elected. That's just my personal opinion.
But how do you successfully do that?
That's
Well, I
the
think it can-
$24,000 question.
I think
don't
it can be done,
anybody
and I think
knows.
in this next week we're going to find out, frankly.
It is scary. I agree.
He's been trying to ask a question forever.
I, like many of the folks here, am old enough to remember 1968.
Amen. Chicago.
Comment on that, if you would.
1968 was a disaster. The Democratic Party was still reeling from the Vietnam War and the fact that it had taken ownership. Poor Hubert Humphrey just got killed before he ever got out of the gate by Vietnam protesters. And by the way, this is just, again, a personal opinion. The way we treated our Vietnam vets when they came home is absolutely abominable. These folks didn't start that war. They were over there because we sent them there, and then we turned around and defiled them, and I mean, it was just horrible.
We've just been listening to Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, and she does a lot of talking about the Johnson administration. And in conjunction with that, I've just finished reading The Women by Kristen Hanna. And if you've not read that, it's about the nurses in Vietnam and what they experienced there and how they were treated when they got back. Kathleen Ballou wrote a book called Bring the War Home. Now, we talk about paramilitary groups in America and the hate groups, the rise of white supremacy and hate groups in America. Southern Poverty Law Center tracks a lot of that. But she talks about in her book how what has happened after these wars, Afghanistan, all these wars, people come home out of that, particularly after Vietnam, where there was such hostility toward that war and such a bad, the veterans bore the brunt of that hostility about the war. But they came back with training, tactical training. They knew how to use weaponry. And if you looked at what the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys did on January 6th, you remember that thread that went up? That's a military tactic. And so we've got people who are armed and mad in a lot of cases. And some of that has to do with the 1968 repercussion.
My question is, aren't there parallels now with that debacle in 1968 if we change courses now?
Well, and
Well,
there may be.
it depends on how it's handled, and I think there is that possibility. I'll have to tell you, I'm very worried because just about every scenario I look at and try to chase the rabbit down the hole ends up with Donald Trump winning the election.
But we cannot
which is
lose
just,
hope, people. We
you know,
cannot lose hope.
A lot of my friends are saying, "What country are we moving to?"
Okay, one more question back here.
Well, we've still got 10 minutes.
No.
You don't know how long my question is. So I hear all of this talk about especially extreme partisanship. And my question is, I'm concerned about the presidential election, but I'm equally concerned about our local community. And I see that hyper-partisanship coming into play quite a lot here. My question for you is, have you seen examples of local communities in North Carolina who come together to go beyond those partisan divides and work for the community good?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with groups of people who are willing to be open and to discuss and to listen to each other. We've lost that civility in our communities. We've lost the capability. When you sit across a guy at a Rotary Club and you're talking about election campaigns, I say a guy, it can be a gal too, and you're talking about election campaigns, and he says, well, I'm supporting Donald Trump, are you going to get up and throw your meal at him? No, because you have, over a period of time, developed a relationship with that person. And I could say to this person, I just don't agree with you on that one. Let me tell you what I think. And if it is done in a basis of established friendships, relationships, then I think you can very easily accomplish some of that so far as the partisanship is concerned. It is a big problem, and I think my personal feeling is that municipal elections ought to be nonpartisan. They should not have any kind of party affiliation attached to it whatsoever. Now, I'm dreaming, I think, but that's what I think.
I think evenings like tonight, where interested people come together and hear the stories, everybody will kind of we've heard the same kind of stuff. All of us have heard the same stuff tonight. And to be able to take that into conversation, whether you agree with it or not, to take that into conversation, because it doesn't have to be contentious. We can say, did you hear what they said? What do you think about that? And, that's the only way, and this Partners organization, I think, is a great opportunity to begin that as this spreads out and more people join this movement. And
of course, it has to be said, I mean, most of you are here because of your opposition to Donald Trump, right? Is there anybody that's not here for that reason? So, I mean, that defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do, because this is a partisan group to start off with. But I think that one of the charges that we've got is to try to reach out to other people and touch other people. We will take one more question. Is the mic on? I don't think it's on.
Testing.
A couple of examples of the mess. I'm a 65-year Democratic voter. I'm far left of the party. My 3 sons are skilled craftsmen. They're Trump voters. We have to decide how to get to a 65-70% party. The big question then for me is, why did Trump beat both parties soundly in 2016? We have not answered that yet. My sons told me that about NAFTA 20 years ago, and I could go on and on, but the points I make is Trump beat both parties very soundly. The Democratic Party does not talk about economics. Economics has not been discussed tonight. So
It has been discussed tonight.
No, not the way we should talk about it. There is, and that's one of the problems. That's one of the number of billionaires who live in the United States today, and even in North Carolina, is shocking, absolutely shocking. And the wealth disparity helps fuel a lot of the grievance among us.
There's a new movie coming out Friday called America on Fire. Michael Douglas is one of the co-producers and is the narrator of this movie. And we heard an interview that he did this morning on TV, on our Sirius XM radio, talking about it. Maybe some of y'all have heard it too. But he talked about the fact that capitalism, frankly, is broken. And I've written about this.
Yeah.
When I first started covering politics, back in 1980, the CEO of a company made 47 times more than the average worker who worked for his company. Do you know what it is today? 280 something. They're getting more, they're getting, well, it may be higher than that, I don't know. But, I mean, think about the disparity there. And Michael Douglas in his movie says part of the problem that we've got with partisanship is because the middle class, he says the Dow Jones Industrial Average has increased by 380% since 1980. Living wages, actual wages, have increased by 16% since 1980. No wonder there are a lot of people mad. And there are a lot of people in the middle class. And it's understandable. And I, to your point, I think that is something that we have to talk about and have to address. And to his credit, Bill Clinton worked really, really hard to do that. He wrote a book about it, as a matter of fact. But it is something that we've got to address, and it's something that we've got to take actions about. Yes, I can take one more question. I'm here all night.
Puzzles me is Trump is not giving any solutions to those guys either.
He's not going to.
You're right.
He's got no solution.
He's going to cut, taxes for the most wealthy. Trickle-down economics is nuts. It does not work. It never trickles down. And so I don't know why people don't understand the fallacy of that economic plan. But because you don't have to look very far to see that that's what happens. When people can exponentially grow wealth off tax advantages like that, and the rise and fall of the stock market, it's just wrong.
Well,
We need to.
the 2017 tax cuts that he put into effect, which were so beneficial to the upper income tax brackets, are set to expire next year. And our Congress, depending on how we elect them, is going to have to decide to do that or let them expire.
Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to use my outdoor.
I have a closing if I can give one.
Oh, sure.
All right. I hope we have done something along the lines of what y'all wanted us to do tonight, and I hope it has been fairly informative and entertaining. And if nothing else, you've seen how a 59-year marriage has worked, or hasn't. I want to leave you with a word on a positive note from one of our favorite movies. The movie is The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Have many of you seen that? Dev Patel was the lead actor in that, with a cast of just incredible, strong movie stars in that movie. But throughout the course of the movie, he had one line. You remember that line? He says, "Everything will turn out well in the end. And if it is not well, it is not the end." And that's the message that I think we need to carry forth, is let's fight, let's work, let's do all we can, but let's remember it's not the end.
This microphone's working, so I'll use this one. Another round of applause for them visiting here. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a Transylvania Partners for Democracy event. I want to let you know that we have 2 events planned going forward. So on August 13th, a Tuesday night, hopefully right here, we're pretty sure, we're going to have a Forum for Action discussion. There will be a panel of folks, and people are invited to come talk about actions going forward. Also, on September the 17th, anybody know what that is? It's Constitution Day. So we're going to sponsor a rally on the courthouse steps for the Constitution and bring up these issues on the courthouse steps. So we'll be organizing a rally. More details on both of the events, these events coming up. If you're not on our mailing list, take a card in the back. It'll take you to our webpage so you can get on our mailing list. And we also we may have $1,000 like Wayne said, but we need a little more to get all this done. So if you'd like to donate, you can on our webpage. Thank you all for coming.